Okay, I think we'll get started. Our main topic today is going to be identity theft in the dark web. If you don't have a handout, there's handouts back in right-hand corner there. Before we get to our main topic, we have a few club items to cover. Future meetings, our next the general meeting will be September 18th back here in the Caribbean room. And the topic will be 5G and hotspots, how you can set up your phone to be a hotspot, which is like a portable Wi-Fi. And we'll talk about 5G as a possible option to replace Comcast and CenturyLink for your home internet. So there's some nice things happening with 5G. It may take a year or two before a lot of this stuff starts showing up in some of the devices, but it's coming. The other, like I mentioned, was smartphone hotspots. The next MaxSig is September 27th. Officers, our president is Jim Holman. Linda Brown is our vice president. Paul Ebert is our membership secretary. I don't see Paul here. Mike Griffin is our treasurer in MaxSig. Stan, I see him back, is our secretary. Oh, Stan. Andrew Petrucci is our communication coordinator, and my name is Tom Kreuzer. I'm a director at large. Members old and new, you can pay your dues to Paul. Otherwise, since Paul isn't here, just drop them off with me and I'll get them to Paul at our next board meeting. Also a reminder, if you're changing your email, whether you're retiring or a provider or something there, make sure and notify us, because that's the way we send out these meeting notices and keep in touch with people. Suggestions for topics, you can email your ideas, talk to any of the board members. We're always looking for people to volunteer or present on hardware or software, maybe something that you use at home or something that you use here at work. If you don't want to present, we do have a monthly newsletter. You can write a short, meaning a sentence or two or multiple pages for the newsletter. Website, we publish past meetings and slides and handouts. So if you miss any of the meetings or want to go back or lose the handout or whatever, you can go out to the website and you can find the information there. We also try and record most of the meetings, so if we can record them, you'll see that out there also. We also have a deal section, our monthly newsletter, and the information is on there. It's also on the handout and on the emails that we send out. Any club questions before we get to the main topic? Okay. Our main topic today, as I mentioned, is identity theft and the dark web, and I'll be presenting. My name is Tom Kreuzer. What do Dunkin' Donuts, Fortnite, Sprint, Equifax, Capital One, and the Dow Jones all have in common? Well, they've all suffered massive hacks in 2019. And after almost all of these data breaches, the data that's been stolen or breached there is usually surfaces for sale on the dark web, the encrypted hidden internet that's known as the dark web there. This just came out yesterday. It's an interesting comment from a Forbes article. And they were talking about, so far this year, there has been 4.1 billion records have been breached or stolen in 2019, just in 2019 there. I mentioned a few of the breaches in the previous slide. There's been over 3,800 publicly disclosed breaches. Now, the big ones, the Equifax, Capital One, stuff like that, the top 8 breaches account for, I think, 3 billion of the records. So the rest of the breaches are relatively small. So it could be It could be your local church. It could be a hospital. It could be all these other places where their data has been stolen. But the data has been stolen in close to 4,000 from 4,000 servers out there. Of the data that's stolen, 70% of the breached contain an email account. So, you know, because companies are collecting all this information on us, one of the important things out there is your email address, and 70% of these breaches do include an email account. 65% of the breaches include a password. So that's why it starts getting real dangerous there. Okay, what is identity theft? Well, identity theft is when thieves use someone's personal data to either take over or open new accounts for financial gains. So they're using that data, that information about you and that to either take over an account or to open a brand new account.
See, Tom, I don't think you necessarily have to have financial gain. You just have to do it for fun, right?
Well, identity theft is somebody actually doing something against you. Hacking is doing it for fun or things like that. So some people will steal data, but then other people are making money selling it on the dark web. So you had like the Capital One breach. The person that stole the data with his or her flash drive, he copied the data. She claims that she never exposed any of it, but if any of her friends or anybody got on her computer, they could have uploaded that information to the dark web. Yes.
Good question on that is, I mean, okay, she took all that data. I mean, where did she store it? I mean,
she stored it on a flash drive.
What?
She stored it on a flash drive.
40 million accounts go on one flash drive?
Yeah, currently I can get a flash drive that's almost a terabyte in size. But even if I had 64 gigabytes, depending on how much data I have about each person, data is relatively small. You know, a password, maybe 12 characters, an account, maybe 20 characters. So you can have millions on a flash drive there. Okay, the personal data can include things like a name, date of birth, social security number, account ID, an email, bank account, credit card number, PIN numbers, passwords, can be an address, can be your net worth. Just think of all the information that you've given companies, whether filling out a comment card or when you sign up for a website. There's a ton of information out there. And so all these companies are collecting all kinds of different information. And when somebody breaches or gets into those databases, they potentially have access to all that information. So literally, it can be thousands of pieces of information about a person or about an account there. Your personal data is always at risk and usually is stolen long before you realize that you're a victim. So most of these breaches, the word doesn't come out until months and maybe even a year after it actually occurred. Do we find out that the data has been stolen? Because in this case, the Capital One that we were just talking about, she started bragging to her friends about how she had stolen all this data there. It wasn't a case of Capital One identifying that somebody had stolen data. So usually it happens after the fact that somebody has a problem or brags, and then they trace it back, and they end up finding that it may have occurred 6 months, a year ago, or whatever there. What are the most common ways that your identity is stolen? Well, the first is data breaches. Obviously, as we were talking, if you can copy a database, you can get millions, or if millions of accounts and IDs potentially from breaking into servers out there. Another way is malware and spyware. So if my machine gets infected, there's ways to capture that, and we've talked about some of that before. What can happen on the personal computer there, and that you're only getting data from this personal computer, so that's kind of a little less attractive than trying to break into, let's say, 3M's accounts or Capital One's or whoever's accounts there. Another popular way is phishing and spam attacks. These are the annoying emails that you get, or telephone calls. So it could be a telephone call of somebody calling up and saying, your bank account is going to be deactivated unless you give me the account number, and I have to validate social security number, and they try and get people to give up personal information there over the phone, and they're very successful at it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have as many telephone calls and that. So people will get the information that way. Same way with emails. You click on a link and you think you're going to your bank account or something, but it's a phony site that's just collecting information about you. Getting your passwords, getting your account numbers, things like that. The last way here is Wi-Fi hacking. We've talked before about if you have a laptop or a phone for that matter, or stuff like that, and you're connecting to public Wi-Fi, which may not be encrypted and doesn't have a password or anything there. That's like just broadcasting whatever you're doing. I could sit right next to you and I could see everything, every site that you're going out to. I could see the information that you're entering in. And if I was malicious, I could use that then to try and log into your same accounts or capture information about you there. So public Wi-Fi is another popular way to collect information. And in addition to going to a coffee shop and connecting, and they have no security, one of the ploys that hackers will use is I'll use my phone and turn it into a public hotspot, and I'll name this public hotspot something like, let's say I was here at 3M, I'd say, oh, I'm going to name it 3M guest. And I can call that public hotspot anything that I want. Somebody trying to connect their phone is going to connect through mine. I can watch all the traffic going back and forth, and I can steal information that way. So hackers can use these hotspots and other ways to intercept data and hack. Okay, what are some of the most common ways that your identity is used by thieves? So people can steal the information. Now, what can they do with it? Well, probably the biggest thing is open fraudulent credit card accounts in your name. So that's if they have the social security number and bank account numbers and birthdays and addresses and phone numbers, I can open up a new credit card because there's plenty of stores, there's plenty of online sites where it's easy to sign up for new credit cards, and as long as I have enough information about the person. They could use your credit cards or account numbers to actually make purchases. So if the data that they got has your credit card number on it, you'll see people immediately use the credit card, buy from Best Buy and buy gift cards or stuff like that, and they'll attempt to make purchases as quick as they can before it's detected that the card number is being used by somebody else other than the original owner there. Another way to make lots of money is to sell your personal information on the dark web. So once I have this information from a data breach or from some of these other sources, I can put it up for sale on the dark web. And there's people out there that are making millions of dollars a year selling your information. They're not breaking into your credit card. They're not doing it themselves. They're just selling the information to other people who are then going to use the information to try and break into your accounts. So it's a huge marketplace for buying and selling information out on the dark web. Another one you may have heard of is fraudulent tax returns. So you'll hear the IRS. I mean, the IRS solution to this is kind of a joke because the IRS will say, file early so that you get your tax return in before somebody fraudulently puts in your tax return. Now, I'm kind of going, shouldn't you try and make it harder for somebody to do that instead of just saying, file early because somebody may be out there trying to file a tax return in your name to get a refund. So yeah, it's a crazy situation out there, and if you file your taxes, you know that you don't need a whole lot of information to file somebody else's. I need a social security number and what's their verification to verify who you are. Well, they'll ask you for one piece of information, usually from your last tax return. Well, if your last tax return happens to be for sale out on the dark web, somebody's got that. So easy enough to do. You can buy that, and you'll see later an example of buying past tax return. Yeah, if they paid, if they filled it out and they had to pay, but they're gonna adjust their taxes, which is the other stupid thing with the IRS is the IRS will pay a refund before validating any information. So if I say in there that I had so much in deductions, if I had this much withheld, they aren't even matching to W-2s. That's a process that happens later on because if they had to match everything before they paid out a refund, nobody would get a refund for probably 3 months or 4 months. And they pay, and then if they find out that it's wrong number on your it doesn't match to your W-2, what do? They send you out a letter and say, there's been an error, send us back the money that we sent you. You know, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's some loopholes there. Yeah. What's the dark web? The dark web isn't one site. There isn't a www.darkweb.com. So some people think, oh, I'll just put in this URL and I'll go out to the dark web. No, dark web isn't one site there. The internet is made up of 3 different webs. They're called clear, deep, and dark. And we'll talk a little. The clear web is the internet that most of us use on a day-to-day basis. It's accessed from your browser and is regularly indexed by Google, Yahoo, Bing, and that's where we do our day-to-day things in that. That's 4% of the web. So that's only 4% of the entire web in terms of servers and everything there. The deep web is the other 96%, which is the unindexed internet. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few seconds here. The dark web is a small section of the deep web. So the dark web is a small part there inside the deep web, and it's used for illegal activity. Things like illegal drugs, buying and selling drugs, weaponry, guns, AK-47, whatever you want, stolen personal data, the data breaches, that kind of stuff, counterfeit money, and there's also websites and forums which host illegal content like child pornography, white supremacy or anything that you didn't want to be traced or that ends up on the dark web. That's roughly 6% of the deep web. So the majority of the internet is in the deep web, but it's not the dark web. And the deep web, an example of that would be 3M has many internal websites and stuff that we just use to do business inside 3M. We don't expose to the outside world. Well, that's part of the deep web. So the deep web isn't all bad things. It's stuff that just isn't indexed by Google. So Google can't get into these sites, can't see these sites inside 3M. So it isn't indexed and it isn't meant to be used by everybody in the world or seen by everybody in the world. So everything on the deep web is not bad. The other thing that you can see here, this is an example of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg, the 4%, is what we have in the clear web that you use day to day. The deep web is all of this thing that's underneath in the internet, and the dark web is just a small percentage of the deep web there.
Was that partitioned that way, or does that percentage change?
It can change at any time. I mean, it's constantly changing because new sites are added, new services are added. Right, right. And those are just rough numbers too. It's not meant to say, well, if I do a Google search on a particular item, I'm going to get 2 million hits of websites. Well, people right away would say, how can I get 2 million hits if it's only 4%? Because there's billions of servers out there. There's billions of servers all around the world. I can create a server on my laptop right here, and I could host it. So anybody with a 20-year-old computer, I could take that 20-year-old computer and turn it into a server and put it on the internet and host illegal activity or legal activity, whatever I chose to do. The domain names that you're talking about are domain names that are used up here. This goes through a clearinghouse. This does not. I can just create it. So if I'm at 3M and I want to make something available to the rest of the people at 3M, I can create it. I could create it so that it doesn't even have a name. I can just give you an address that you can click on, or a URL that you can click on that has the TCP/IP address, and you can use that to connect. The other way is that there's things called domain name servers. Well, there's domain name servers that are used for this, and there's a completely different domain name servers that are used for the dark web and these others. You don't use those, or you shouldn't be using them.
No, I know, but there's no control at all.
Yes.
There's no way to get in there and shut stuff down.
Yeah, you'll see a little later. I'll talk about that, and there's good and bad about all of that. So we always hear about the bad, but because if I was in China or I was in somewhere that was oppressive, I wouldn't want to be traced back because I could be killed or jailed. And so there's good reasons to have sites that, Chinese government can lock this out. They tell Google, they say, you want to be able to be anyone search Google in China, you have to block these sites and not let them do it, and Google complies with that. And so, yes. And so Google can control that, but yeah, well, we'll talk here. So the dark web, that small 4% there, anyone can go out there. So it doesn't say that only me and the rest of you guys can't go out there. Anybody can go out there. You just have to have, in some cases, specific software, specific configurations, and specific authorizations. And some require more than others, but anybody can. Depends on the site. Depends on the site and what it is. And some cases it's just a email that's sent to somebody or that with a link. And like I say, I could turn this into a server here and I could send you a link and we'd be exchanging stuff between the two of us there, and it's only between the two of us. So it can be one person, person to person, can be multiple people, can be organizations, can be anything. Dark websites are usually accessible only through networks such as Tor, which is the anonymity network, or I2P, which is the Invisible Internet Project. So as soon as the internet was created, you had people creating these ways to hide things out there. And these have been around for as long as the internet has been around. And we'll talk a little bit about that graphic in a little bit. Thor focuses on providing anonymous access to the internet. I2P specializes in allowing anonymous hosting of websites out there. Identities and locations of dark web users stay anonymous and cannot be tracked due to their layered of encryption that's being used. So this is just a simple example of a client out here trying to get to some information. So let's say it is this breached data. They're going to buy the breached data. This server selling the breached data, nobody knows where it is. Could be my PC here, could be in China, could be up on the North Pole, could be anywhere in the world. And nobody knows where it is. Because in order to get from here to here, it's going through multiple servers. And these multiple servers are constantly changing and rerouting stuff. So if the government wanted to try and listen in, they can only find it, let's say, from here to here. They know that somebody used an encryption service, but then they lose track of it. They don't know that it went here, Could have gone to 100 other servers and then finally gotten to this server here. So to shut down a server or to find out who owns it, nobody knows who owns it.
So my computer could be a server without me even knowing.
Yes, and that's what happens in some cases with spyware or a virus, is they can take over a computer and turn it into some of these malicious things and that. But in most cases, it isn't because, again, like I say, I can take any old computer and I can turn it into a server, and as long as I have an internet connection, I can connect it up to the internet. The internet doesn't say you're only allowed one machine or you're only allowed this. The internet is open and free for anybody, the good and the bad. So you do, and you can get this software, and there's software for the phone and stuff like that too. So I can access this stuff off my phone, off a tablet, off a PC, off a Mac, off of any platform. There's tools out there to access. Okay. Dark websites increase the value of the stolen data. So we talk about those data breaches. They may have just got a password and a account number, and they don't have anything else. Well, they can make that data more valuable by aggregating it with other publicly available data. Things like an address, things like your spouse, your children, your net worth. You start aggregating that data and it becomes more valuable because now it can be used to open accounts and do other functions there. Individuals' data can cost anywhere from a few pennies to up to like $300. So this is an example out here. Here's W-2 tax forms for 2016, $8.49. And just like eBay, you can do a buy it now. But it lists all the fields that it has: employer numbers, social security numbers, things like that. And you can see some of the breaches here where there's more data or it's more sensitive data. The data is worth more. If you have a PayPal, from the PayPal breach, that's currently selling for $247 per account, whereas the Costco breach is $5. So there's different things that you can get. And if you look at each of those, you'd see which fields they have and decide what you want there. The buyers of this information are spammers, so in some cases, they aren't even opening up a credit card or that. They're just buying a million email addresses. Well, I could buy the entire Equifax breach of, what was, I forgot the number there, if that was, yeah, does anyone recall how many million were in there? I think it was 60 million or something like that. I could buy the 60 million email addresses for, I believe it was $4,700. And then I could start sending out the spam email to people there to try and get them to buy something or to promote my product. Well, that's pretty cheap to get that many million email addresses. And you know that the people have credit cards and things like that. So the spammers will definitely buy some of this information. The other is credential stuffers who take usernames and passwords that are leaked on one site and try and log into other sites. So if there's a breach at Costco and Costco gives up its account numbers and passwords, they'll buy it and try and log into Wells Fargo to see if you've used the same account number and password there. So that's why you'll see in the tips and stuff like that, we've always said, never, 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 never use the same password on multiple sites. Every site you want to have a different password and that in there. Okay, let's watch a quick video here. This is a video from CNET on a couple of guys, I think a CBS reporter talking about the dark web.
Dark web. It is full of guns and drugs and other terrible things. So we had a company look for us on the dark web. What did they find about you?
They found data.
Data.
Yeah, so they found spreadsheets of information, not just me, but lots of people. And it was a variety of information that you can then kind of put together to learn more about individual people. But I should note, it wasn't actually me that they found information about. My address popped, and there was information about neighbors who had lived in my apartment building. And it wasn't just little bits of information. These were from what are called fulls dumps. So these are like full portfolios of information about people, their names, where they're from, that kind of information. Then you can use that to do all sorts of stuff.
In this portfolio of information about you and your neighbors, give me some examples of what's in those little rows and columns inside the spreadsheet of information that we call data.
So one particular thing that came out, it was actually information that had been culled from a campaign donation database. And so when you donate to a campaign, you say who you are. Sometimes you put where you're from. And of course, how much money you're willing to give, which is an indication of how much money you have, depending if it's a lot of money. And then they were able to, of course, match this to the actual address where the people came from. If you have this information, and then maybe, for instance, you have an email address, you can really start to put together a profile of a person to replicate them. And I bring up email because that's where you were vulnerable.
Yeah, so it turns out that I was included in a number of different dumps, my email address, as well as my phone number and my UDID. Now, my UDID is my phone, my iPhone's unique device identifier. With that information, I was able to plug this into a Google map and see exactly where my phone had been at almost any given moment in time.
You were truly much more vulnerable on the dark web than I was, and I'm really happy about that. My random address pops up. I mean, your UDID is everything about you in some ways.
The most terrifying thing about this was that it was in a database of about 12 million records.
Okay, so our information was on the dark web, which is not the kind of stuff you can Google for, but on these these marketplaces that have really cliche, mobby kind of names, Omerta and Black Stuff. But some of this information you can get just by Googling or searching people on the surface internet, right?
Yeah, I in fact found my stuff in addition to having our friends look for us. I found my stuff on a dark web search engine called Torch. And then it linked back to a ClearNet search that I found using DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo is a lot like Google, except it indexes almost everything, including darkweb.onion URLs. So I was able to not only find my information, but verify it on the ClearNet.
That means that I don't even have to have any special software to find out where you've been.
That's true.
Okay, get back here. Okay, now that I scared you and you're probably all terrified of any data and the end of the world is here and everything's out there, what I want to do is that you should prepare for the worst, as if your data is out there. You can always hope for the best, that nobody will do anything there, but hopefully with the tips that we'll talk about, it'll help you prepare and make sure that you aren't as vulnerable as if you do nothing at all. Sticking your head in the sand or saying, even if you didn't log into the internet and do anything. So I have people tell me, well, I'm not going to sign up for anything online, or I'm not going to do anything. You can not use a computer, and there's still a ton of information out there because companies collect information about you. Your banks put information out there. The state sells your driver's license information. So there's tons of information about all of us that's out there, whether it's on the dark web or the clear web. And you want to prepare and make sure that you're as safe as possible. Yes.
Google thinks your address is Illinois.
Well, that just means that there may be an account with your name out there in Illinois. Because a lot of people have similar names. You have people changing information. Google doesn't make a determination there. Now, if you said, I went out to my Gmail account, and my Gmail account has wrong information that you did not put in there, then I'd say somebody has gotten into your Gmail account. But just because you do a Google search and it says, such and such a name lives here, well, common names, you'll find, 1,000 people or 10,000 people in the United States with the same first and last name.
So is that correctable at
all? We won't talk about that right now. I mean,
Google had the entrance to the Willow River State Park at my house. That created.
To change that, you can change that. So if you have a problem with Google Maps, whether it's with a street or a building or that, if you go into Google Maps and you go into the settings, there's actually a way to submit a change, and they'll evaluate the change, and if they deem that change, it should be made, they'll make it. So where there are bad things like that, yes. Okay, tips to protect yourself. In April of this year, we did have a meeting on viruses and security, and I'm not going to cover that stuff again, but you do want to have your antivirus installed, you want to have it updated, and you want to have it configured properly. This is probably the biggest one here. Is we always talk about passwords. They should be unique for every account that you have, and you should be changing them and never reuse old ones, old passwords. Because this can be very complicated, you don't want to be writing things down or putting them on post-it notes. Although 3M makes money with each post-it note, I don't recommend that. We recommend using a free package like LastPass. LastPass is a password manager along with other features there. Works on all platforms, iPhone, iPad, Android, laptop, desktop, all these different things. And I've got probably at any time maybe 300 accounts and passwords. Well, I can't possibly keep track of them all. That's why even if you have 5, you want them in LastPass, and you want that to manage it. No.
No.
The simple answer is no. Because of the way that the deals are encrypted, the passwords are encrypted and stuff like that, they could get access to some information. They can't get access to all of it. LastPass has stronger security than you'd find on your bank account. So they do what they're supposed to do, and they do it very, very well. That's why they're in business.
How can they offer this?
Because they have a premium level that you can get more features and functions. It's worth it. You want a password manager. I mean, no ifs, ands, or buts. Yes. It depends on how you installed. You have available through Comcast and through CenturyLink the use of Norton antivirus. It may or may not be installed on your machine because you would have had to make the decision. When you buy new machines nowadays, some of those come with antivirus already installed. So there's look back on the April, and that'll tell you a little bit of information there. But you can go out to Comcast. You could, if you don't have what they're recommending, the Norton antivirus, a particular version, you can download and install it there. I mention in here, do not use the feature in most browsers to save passwords. So if you're using Chrome or you're using Edge or you're using Firefox, by default, if you log into an account, you'll see a little pop-up box that'll say, do you want to save your account and password? And no, do not ever use that. And that gets back to Dan asked the question about LastPass. Well, LastPass does password management as tight as you can. Chrome does not. They are not a password manager company. So they get hacked all the time, and the features and functions and stuff like that just are not there, and the whole method of way they pass passwords and share information between platforms and that. Yeah.
Is there a way I can go into my Chrome browser and delete all of those that I have trusted?
Yeah, go into your settings, and within the settings you can get rid of what you have there.
Okay, but that won't take it out of LastPass.
No, this is strictly Chrome. When you're in the settings for Chrome or that, it's strictly the Chrome browser. And if you've done it with the Edge or with IE, you'll have to do it with that also. But again, those old passwords and stuff like that, you should be changing them, especially your financial and stuff like that, every year or so. So, you know, you shouldn't be using the same password that you used a year ago or 5 years ago or whatever.
So why is that dangerous if you're using it for a website that you
If you don't care about, that's something a little bit different. If it's used for a company that you don't care about, you'll see later we'll talk about using throwaway email and stuff like that. That's different, but everything else, you have your kind of, at least your two classifications of security. Okay, another thing you should do, enable two-factor authentication, where it uses a secondary form of authentication, often a text message that's sent to your phone, or it could be an email or a voice message sent to your phone there. That's especially important for financial banking. You're now seeing it on social sites, and it's just a good thing to have the two-factor. Yes, it can be a little extra hassle, but it offers another level of protection. Another thing you can do is you can watch your credit card and bank statements for unexpected charges and payments. Usually you can go out to the site, turn on notifications from your bank or your brokerage or your credit card transactions. Also, if you use a package like Mint, the online service, the free online service, that can monitor your finances all in one place, so you can pull it up at any time and see what current credit card charges you have, what bank transactions have gone through, things like that. This is an example here. I have a Fidelity credit card, and Fidelity will, once a day in the middle of the night, it'll send me a list of all credit card transactions for the day. And so it's just another way for me to make sure that they're ones I authorized, and that I'm not waiting until the end of the month when the statement comes out and go, oh, here's something I don't know about. I want to know about it right away rather than waiting a month there. And some of them will allow you to do limits. So if you only want to see the transactions above $100 or that, you could do that. There's all different things that you can do. Another thing you can do is you can request a free credit report. So you can request a free credit report once a year, and you can do that to each of the 3 credit services. Credit services, these are not the companies that issue you credit cards. They're a company that provides this service to other credit card vendors, to banks, to colleges, to other institutions there. They collect all kinds of information on every one of us. So even if you don't have a credit card, you're in each of these databases here. And the 3 services are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And you can go out and you can request that you get a credit report from them. Like I say, once a year. If you space it out, you could go every 4 months then to one of these to get a report there. And it'll tell you if a new accounts are being opened up, new credit cards. It'll list your current credit cards. It'll let you see what's going on out there.
You have to give personal information to get the report?
Yes, because if you didn't, anybody could. So yes, the simple answer is, and if you're not familiar with these are the companies that maintain your private history. So they'll ask you things like, have you ever owned one of these 4 cars? Have you ever lived on one of these streets? Did you graduate from one of these high schools? And they have thousands of bits of information on you. And it's their duty to know all that, because that information is used to verify you, not only on their site, but on banking sites, credit card sites. It's used, all these other companies buy the services from these 3 vendors there. And some of the information is not valid. That's why it's better to you to know what information they have on you and correct the information that is incorrect, because otherwise you're going to be trying to apply for a loan or do something, and you're not going to be able to do it because there's incorrect information out. You can't answer the question because their answer doesn't match your answer. Yep.
And they asked me, have I ever lived at these addresses? And the one did go through, but it's kind of like that was pretty freaky.
They know a lot of information about people.
So then when Equifax gets hacked, you know, to me, that's worse than the password manager.
Yes, but so far in all of this too, Equifax has not identified exactly what information was hacked on which people. So there's different groups of people. Some people, your Social Security was given. Others, it may just be your home address. So I don't care if anyone has my home address or my telephone number or that I can live with. But if it's Social Security numbers, and Equifax, when she copied the data, there isn't one database where you say copy all on that. She copied bits and pieces from all over. And so some of the information does have Social Security numbers, others don't. Yep.
Credit card number on my Discover bill, they get it from one of those three?
No, these three are services used by your credit card company. So Capital One is using this service to validate you and to as a clearinghouse. If you had a Capital One, well, let's use a Target credit card. If you have a Target credit card and you aren't making payments, Target reports to these three services that you are not making payments. Somebody looking at your credit score is going to go out to one of these three services and request a credit score, and you're going to get a low number. So these are services providing functions. They don't handle credit card transactions. They don't issue new credit cards. But when a new credit card is issued, Target is going to ask this company, what's their credit score? And possibly use security information out here to secure their website and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, when you do the credit monitoring and you get it from Equifax is going to say, here are the following credit cards that you have open. This Discover card, this Capital One card, this MasterCard, this Fidelity card. They're going to list every one of yours because these other companies have reported to them that you have credit cards and you're either keeping up with payments, you're not keeping up with payments. They know all this information. Yeah, and that's what we'll talk about next here is what you should do is exactly what you were talking about, is you can go out and you can freeze your credit to stop anyone from opening a new credit card or requesting loans or services in your name. And you can also unfreeze it as needed if you do need to get a loan or whatever. But there's the three services, and you can go out and you can put a lock on it. And to put a lock on it, you have to answer a lot of questions. About 25% of the people that I know can't answer their questions or answer them incorrectly, and then you have to do it by paper, back and forth to get it cleared up and that. But you can go out to the site, and I list the sites here. Be very, very careful, again, with a lot of these URLs that I'm telling you, because if you don't type them in right or you go to the wrong site and you start entering some of this information, you're giving your information to a hacker. So you want to make sure that you are going to the right site there. But you can freeze your accounts so that new accounts, new credit cards wouldn't be opened up. So if Target, let's say you applied for a Target credit card, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to check with one of these three services to see what your credit score is, if they should give you credit, and they're going to see, oh, no, there's a freeze here, so we are not going to create a new credit card for that. And then that's going to be an alert, and you can get, if you're monitoring, you're going to get the alert that somebody tried to open up an account in your name, and so you can check it that way. Yes.
I froze my credit about a year ago, but our identity was stolen. So I was getting a bunch of letters from
Right.
They started then on my wife, and those went through, and fortunately we were able to catch them. But you have to, each person has to do it separately.
Yeah, that's a good point there because every account is different and so when things are opened and just like a bank or a brokerage or stuff like that where you have joint accounts too and things like that that can.
Yeah, they're like 30 of them. And the problem is, most of them have an initial credit limit of $5,000, so that'd be $150,000, which I would owe personally because you are not protected from that. You're protected on your credit cards that you open that you know about. You're not covered by any insurance on the cars that are owned by somebody else. Most people don't know that. So it's like you're on the hook unless you can prove that it was wrongfully obtained.
Right. So you do want to stay on top of this stuff and certainly be aware of what's going on, and that's why we mentioned the freezing and the monitoring and stuff like that. Yeah, and I'll get to that a little bit there. Another tip, you can check, like some people have mentioned, go out to the Equifax to see if you have been breached. If you have been breached, and we'll talk a little bit about what they're offering if you have been breached of money and credit monitoring. Capital One was just breached. They don't have the check yet, but you can get information. So these major breaches, there is information out there. But this you have to be very aware of is kind of like what Dan was saying there too. Beware of fake websites, emails, telephone calls, or scammers. They'll pose as they're from Equifax or a government representative trying to clear up your account. And actually all they're trying to do is they're trying to take advantage of people being scared or not knowing what's going on and then giving out, well, what's your credit card number? And we'll automatically take care of putting the freeze on it and stuff like that. No, you don't want somebody else. Never give that information out. So I mentioned here signing up for credit monitoring services. You can pick a credit monitoring service. They will monitor your credit reports on major credit bureaus. They'll also detect unusual activity. They'll also check the dark web to see if some of your information is for sale out there. They'll check that and let you know. And things like LifeLock is one that advertises a lot on TV. That can cost anywhere from $10 to $30 a month. There are free services out there like Credit Karma, and this is a link to CNET's review of credit monitoring. And if you were part of the Equifax, you can get the 10 years of monitoring for free. Yes?
I signed up for Social Security just recently, and about 3 days after I signed up, I got a phone call. She had my name, she had some other information. She said, I want you to give me some more information that we need. And I said, I'm not giving you any information. Well, I understand that you're probably concerned about that. So I'm going to give you a number that you can call that says, I know who I am. I said, I don't want to know who you are. I said, forget it.
Yeah, and they can spoof the number, so caller ID looks like Social Security office.
3 or 4 days.
Yes, and they'll hound you, like you say. So yes, be very cautious of everything there. And the credit monitoring, you can't see too much on here, but there's apps for the smartphone, and you'll get notifications and things like that when your accounts show up, or there's an alert that a credit card is trying to be created or that. So they are worth having. But if you're part of the Equifax group breach, which is probably a third of the people in the United States, we're all in it together. You can get 10 years of free credit monitoring, and you'll see later on that's what I recommend. I recommend using mobile payment systems like Apple Pay or Android Pay. They're more secure than using your physical credit card, because when you do a transaction, instead of your credit card number being processed by the store or company that you bought stuff from, they're getting a one-time use number that cannot be used again. So if I use that at Target and used Android Pay, if somebody broke into Target and got that number, it could not be used again because it was only good for one transaction and cannot be used to charge anything else. So that's where some of these systems are set up for that. PayPal's another one. Use that instead of your credit card if you can, because then vendors aren't getting your credit card number to store in their database and then it being possibly stolen or breached there. No. But not all credit cards can be set up and that in there. So you just have to see Android Pay and Apple Pay. If you're using your phone has to be capable of doing it, which is a specific kind of messaging system there. Yes. Yeah, Zelle, we talked about those a couple of months ago, and those are very good at person-to-person payment systems. Do not use it for person to a vendor because a person to a vendor, you may get the scam type of call where somebody will call you and say, I just sent you $500 accidentally. Could you send back the $500 or for your trouble, send me back $400 and keep $100. And so people think, well, I've got the $500 in my Zelle account, so I'll send them back the $400. So they send back the $400. Well, the person then cancels that $500 payment, and you don't look at your deal. And after three or 4 days, your bank comes back and says the $500 was canceled. You don't have that. Your $400 payment back to him went through perfectly, and he now has your $400. Yeah. Banks don't, well, the banks, that's the trouble. It's not insured. It's not, if you look at the fine print, they aren't handled like a check or anything else. And so that's kind of the deal. They're great for a person to person. So, you know, paying half of the money when you're out to eat, or paying for tickets that somebody else bought or stuff like that from a friend. If you know the person, great. They work great. Don't use it for anything else. And that's what, if you read the fine print on any of those, that's exactly what they'll say too, but people tend not to read the fine print. And so if you want to pay, you know, use an Apple Pay or an Android Pay or things like that. And now even the credit cards, some of those will do the pay. If your new credit card has the Wi-Fi symbol on it there, you can do the touch and go, and that generates a new ID. That isn't giving them the ID of the card. But I'm over a little bit. I'll try and rush through the rest here. VPN, virtual private network, great for privacy, especially the public Wi-Fi, where we talked about people listening in. Great for that. I don't see a need for it other than public Wi-Fi. So some people say, well, I want to use it at home and always be protected in that. For the extra overhead and the problems that it can cause, it's not worth it. But for public Wi-Fi, if you're going to be using devices and things like that, it can protect you there. I recommend installing a Google Chrome extension called Password Check. It'll tell you if your passwords have been hacked. It looks at your username and passwords because it knows everything going on in the browser there. And it looks on the dark web and it sees if this account and password is out on the dark web, and it'll let you know whether that's vulnerable or not. It works very good there. Having said that about an extension, be very cautious of downloading other browser extensions and delete ones that you no longer use. just so far this year, 8 widely used browser extensions were caught harvesting data from over 4 million people using their browsers, Chrome and Firefox. The extensions collected information that wasn't authorized by either browser. They were collecting tax returns, medical records, credit card information, and other sensitive data. All of these extensions have been remotely removed or disabled in the consumer's browser, so they're no longer available for downloading. But hackers are constantly creating new extensions and trying to steal information. So you have to be careful about these extensions and what information. Use a different email address for different kinds of accounts. We talked about that a little bit. Consider using one email or that for signing up for apps that you just want to try or that have questionable security so that you aren't using your main email there. After you've vetted the service and it looks okay, then you can sign up again using your permanent email account. Many sites will use your email as the account number, but some of them let you set up your own account. And I'd recommend setting up your own account, use different accounts for different services there. And that works very well with a password manager because it's keeping track of both the account and the password used for a site or for an app there. So you don't have to remember all this stuff. Let the password manager remember it. Okay, this gets back to what you were talking about. If you do have your ID stolen, and that what you want to do is you want to place fraud alerts with all the credit reporting companies, Equifax, Experience, TransUnion. You want to alert your creditors that you've been a victim of fraud, let them know and verify that you are actually making new credit requests. You can place an initial fraud alert, which will stay in place for 90 days. That can be extended for up to 7 years. Placing a fraud alert does not hurt your credit score. Contact fraud departments in each of the businesses and credit cards companies where you think your account was opened or charged without your knowledge. And while you're not responsible for fraudulent charges, you need to report this suspicious activity promptly there. Document everything. Keep copies of all documents, expenses, and records for your convenience about the theft. You can create a recovery plan, and I think that's what you were mentioning. The FTC has information to create your own recovery plan, and you can go out to the website and get that information too, and it'll tell you how to recover from these things. Yeah, no, that's a good point there, because at some point you should have that, because trying to talk with some of these companies, they're going to ask, have you reported it to the police, and what's the case number on that?
Homeowners insurance also has a rider on your policy oftentimes that covers identity theft.
Yeah. Equifax, you mentioned, they are currently, for their breach, they're going to be paying out $700 million. You can check the eligibility on the link. You can either get free credit monitoring services, or you can get $125 in cash if you already have services in place. Now that $125, depending on how many people sign up, and it sounds like there may be millions, so that may be less. So what I'd recommend is getting the credit monitoring, and it'll be 4 years of it through Experian, and then an additional 6 years through Equifax. You'll get the credit monitoring, and that's credit monitoring has more features than just the freezing. So credit monitoring would also give you notifications if it finds other pieces of your information for sale out on the dark web and things like that. So it's more than just one small look there. If you do have fraud, offering 7 years of free service to help remedy the fraud and identity theft.
Tom, do you think mostly lawyers got the $700 million?
So,
No.
Typically, it's about half.
Any customer ever got
Typically, in a settlement like that, about half of it goes to the lawyers. But yeah, yeah.
just for curiosity, it's easy to check that website, whether or not you're eligible, and I did, both my wife and I were back, so I picked $125 and put the monitor on her, so you can do both.
No, that's a good thing there. Although, like Dan said, they are different, two different accounts. So but being aware of what to look for, now you can keep your eyes and ears open for what's happening there. But roughly, about a third of the people in the country were affected by the hack. So it's, yeah.
If you're offered the credit monitoring by one company, and a year later you're offered the monitoring for another hack, is there a problem if you have two or more monitoring services going on?
The monitoring services operate in different ways, either different apps and different things that they're watching. Some of them will be a pain in the neck. I think that's like Jim found out. Once your information is out on the dark web, they'll tell you that stuff is out there, and they'll continue to tell you, even though you may have changed your password and done other things. So, it's that case of, well, are you bothered too much, or you're already aware and you've already taken steps? That's why the Chrome browser, the password check is just kind of an additional reminder. Oh, I forgot to change the password out on this site. I am using an old password, and that password is now available on the dark web there. Yeah.
Is there a feature on LastPass that you can go in and just change everything at once as far as how big your account is?
Not that I'm aware of, and I guess I wouldn't necessarily want that, because you kind of have to make decisions on what to change. And oh, maybe there isn't a premium. And I guess I have kind of two classifications. There's the accounts and the passwords that I'm not really that concerned about, and then there's the financial ones and stuff like that I am very concerned about. So I do not change all of my accounts every year. I change my financial ones at least every year there. So it's, you kind of have to find that median of what you're doing there. But if insofar as I usually let it generate the password, so the password is a strong password. If you're using any combination of words and letters, chances are, even though it may have passed their check of passwords there, it's a weaker password.
I did sign up for Medicare, and right on the online application, it said we may have to call you for further information. And do you agree to this? And I did agree to it. They haven't called because it went through okay.
One of the checks on that kind of thing, so just like Dan was talking about, if it shows up as caller ID of the Social Security, that can be spoofed or changed to read anything. So if you're unclear of that, write down the number and verify that that's the correct number that you should be calling, and then call back that number. Don't rely on your caller ID being accurate, because I just had an argument with my brother-in-law where he was saying, oh, it's hard to spoof on that. And I got on the internet, and 5 minutes later, I made a phone call to him from the White House.
Why are you here doing this? You could be a billionaire.
I've hacked into a few systems in my time. Don't worry. I'm okay. Yeah, so you can make it. You can spoof anything there, but.
Would we be better off with a greater than 9-digit Social Security number that they can't wait for you to die, so they can use the number in the next 5 minutes?
I mean, we'll have to see. There may not be any money there to give out in the future, so I don't know if it's.
On the social security card, it says not to be used for identification.
Right.
But it's used all the time.
Right.
Yeah, if you go to the doctor.
Other questions or? This is, I'll just pop up this. This is Google Chrome here. And extension, if you're not familiar, extensions usually go up on top there. So I'm using an ad blocker there. I have LastPass. I have a font deal that changes my colors for some of my links that I've been to. But I also have, this is the app here, or the extension here, password check up there, and it'll tell you if things are okay or if it's seen this password and account and what's there. And you do want it to read green. If it's not green, you got major problems. You're vulnerable there. So it's a simple little thing to have there. Well, I just started it up since I was here. So no, this is analyzed, this is my laptop, and I don't use it that much here. But yeah, I've had it pop up there and on accounts that I haven't changed the password. So I'm one of those people that, yes, I've said things. Now, do I follow everything? I follow most of what I said, but I'm lazy like everybody else. Some of the accounts I don't get around and don't get the stuff there. It's an extension. You install the extension. If you go into Chrome here and you go to more tools, extensions, and just like if you're not familiar, just like this is kind of the app store here. You can search for things, you can install things, you can uninstall things, and so you can go through and find.
Now, are all those saved because they're there? No.
No, and that's where I was talking about the 8 that were capturing stuff. Well, they don't find out about them till after the fact. Then they take them off. Then they'll uninstall. But unfortunately, and so what you should do there is do your due diligence. Only believe a review from a reliable source that this is a good extension, and then make sure that you install it from the Google so that you're getting the right extension too. But certainly, if you just do a Google search on is this extension good, well, a hacker's smart enough to know I'm going to create some web pages and I'm going to create some reviews that say that it's the best thing out there and everybody should put it in. But if it's coming from PC Magazine, CNET, some of the more reliable places, that's entirely different than one obscure website or Twitter post or something. Yeah, and you can pay for getting good reviews, likes, and don't go by likes, don't go by a lot of things because all anyone does is pay for. You can pay for so many people commenting and Yelp reviews and things like that. They're worth in some cases looking at, but don't believe it as gospel that everything is good.
This last pass puts up on your laptop, so it's sort of particular to that laptop. So if you wanted to somebody else's laptop, you wouldn't be able to get the password. You need to get it to.
The LastPass an encryption, the way that they encrypt it and move information around there. Technically, the password is not stored up on their servers, but is available to all these other devices. So I could go to another machine that had LastPass. I log in with my account, my LastPass account and password. I have access to my full suite of passwords.
But they would have to have LastPass.
Right. And that's what I was just going to say. If you don't want to put it at you're using at the library you're logging in, or you're at a friend's place and you're logging in, I'll just go on my phone, bring up LastPass. I can see my password. I can put in my account and my password, that way. Other questions? I use the free. I mean, I haven't had a problem. I mean, there are features and functions in all of these, and so I'm not saying don't use it, because if you like that or that, but yeah, it used to be a case of LastPass, the free version worked on the PC, and then I think if you wanted it on an iPhone or an Android, you had to buy, for $2.99 or something like that, buy the app, the LastPass app. But now it's free, or there's a free version of LastPass on all the platforms. Okay. Okay, thank you.
I sent a link to my sister, who's a computer neophyte,
Yeah.
and it was a zip file. And she was able to download it just fine, but when she double-clicked it to open it, it tried to open it in Word. And I had her try looking at other options, and it didn't have any zip